Well, good Monday or Tuesday morning here, everyone on the Markcast. Happy 4th of July if you are in the United States celebrating that. Happy Canada Day, long weekend if you are our friends up north. Interesting week here. A lot of trash talk has been said here. I did not skip Bayless. I very close to skip Bayless my hat into the trash last night, but I still have it on today here after a little bit of an interesting game here. I don't know if it lived up to what we expected, but it certainly lived up to something nonetheless. Jason and Evan standing by. We'll bring them on. I'll kind of preview the show here. We'll get into everything. Jason, a lot of smack talk from me, at least, your lack of a quarterback and struggling games. And, Evan's kind of a BC Lions fan with me. We're eating a little bit of humble pie today. How are you doing, Jason?
I'm doing great, Reid. How are you?
I'm sure you're doing great. Evan, welfare check. How do you feel today?
I feel good. Wasn't here last week, but excited to talk about the 3 games. It's a bit of a lesser slate because Calgary, Hamilton, Saskatchewan, all on a bye, obviously. But yeah, it should be good.
It should be good. Yeah, BC fans, a little bit of, dismayed today, but we'll get into that. I don't know if the sky's falling. Anything else? To set everything up, we'll do BC and then the Winnipeg game. And then I was saying before we got on here, Ottawa feels like a lifetime ago. I do have this article Jim Mullen shared, friend of the show. We were going back and forth last night about our BC Lions woes, and then Mariners with a thrilling 6-5 win here in the 9th inning. But this 3 Down Nation article, 8 ways you feel like CFL leadership is failing the fans. So I think we'll get into that in the end of the show because, normally we get like 4 games for the hour. We have the 3 this week. But I did want to say, and I echoed this sentiment, and I saw a lot of people echoing this. Arash Madani, friend of the show here, I was sitting there Thursday of the long weekend, no CFL games. I was sitting there Sunday of the long weekend, no CFL games. Jason, we have a 3-team bye. It's a long week. Like, what do you make of this? Because there was nothing else going on this weekend. I mean, I know there's like regional baseball and stuff.
Yeah, I just don't agree with how they scheduled this week. Maybe it was due to something like the stadium availability at BMO Field. But at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure this game should have been on the Sunday, honestly, because when you only have 3 games on that week, it doesn't really make too much sense. Thank goodness we didn't have a Thursday game this week because it would have been stretched even more thin. And then it was just kind of a disjointed week with the whole rain delay on Saturday as well. So, I mean, it was just a weird week for the CFL schedule.
Yeah, it was weird. I went back and watched, and we'll get into it. I had some notes on kind of the delay, but it was my birthday on Saturday, and I went back. It felt like that game existed in the vacuum. I saw nothing about it. I'm like, oh, okay, there was like a rain delay. Okay, Winnipeg, beat the snot out of the Alouettes. Okay, and I went back and watched it, and they had to preempt it, and there was kind of all that stuff. Evan, I know, like, we're sitting here, we're in our best life Monday. I have to work today. I have a wedding today, but, a lot of people are off today, but that's not necessarily the case for these Canadian viewers here for the long weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a weird slate, and the weather delay didn't help things. I thought it was very... a bit too spread out, obviously, again, given, the long weekend. I feel like you should have just had Friday, Saturday, Sunday done, or even like a doubleheader or something on Canada Day, maybe on Saturday. I don't know. That's just a thought. But yeah, I'm sure it looks like it's going to return to normal in week 5 because you're back to a 4-game slate. So.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this, it's just Arash Madani says, why have a Canadian professional football game up against nothing else on the sports calendar on the Sunday of a long weekend, the beginning to new beginnings? The other thing I just wanted to know, and I don't need to play this, but shout out, I thought Rod on his show Friday did a good job, friend of the show, talking just about a lot of the grassroots stuff that Rod and he feels like the CFL used to do and kind of failing to do now, where he's sitting there, he's like, we have 3 teams on the bye week. It's the Friday of a long weekend. No one's calling me to come on the show. No one's calling to promote anything. And just, why is that happening? And just kind of the state of the CFL here. So I just thought that was interesting, but it really echoed to me. And I know we'll get into this here maybe later in the show with kind of the leadership and everything that, maybe CFL fans are a little, disenfranchised right now. Jason, overall, for the 3 games, what did you make just kind of, top level view here?
I think it was pretty sloppy overall in the 3 games. I just didn't think I was that, the Friday game was pretty rough. The Saturday game was pretty rough once it got going after the rain delay. And then the Monday game, it started off very good, but then, unfortunately, Toronto kind of just took away with it, ran away with it in the second half, that is.
Yeah, Evan, yeah, kind of your 30,000-foot view here looking down.
Yeah, I mean, it was the Toronto BC game was obviously the best, but even that one got out of hand really quickly, and really wasn't entertaining after probably second quarter, you could argue. So yeah, I don't know, just a pretty boring slate, I guess you would say this week. Nothing too exciting.
So I guess we'll get in here. We'll start with kind of the marquee one, and we'll kind of move our way back here. BC Lions, big hyped here the Monday night. For the record, and I posted this in the chat, I don't count the Argos having a week one bye. I don't count them as the same level of undefeated as the BC Lions. We kept having this matchup of the two undefeated teams. BC Lions played 3 games. Argos are on the bye week next week as well. So I play the same number of games, call it that. Jason, am I out of line in that I think that the Argos need to prove something else here before they're the true champions of the undefeated?
Yeah, I agree with that because, like you said, they have that weird thing going on with the 2 buys in the first half of the season. Actually, I believe someone said to me that they have 3 buys in the first half of the season, and then they play like 10 games in a row to end the year. But just a weird situation going on with the Argos schedule. And I wouldn't weigh it too much as being like a true undefeated team so far, even though they look like the best team in the league at this point of the season.
Yeah, if you wanted to know Mike Mitchell, he left his notes. He said, show notes, Argos are the best. Hamilton better not lose to Ottawa and Edmonton the next 2 weeks. So that is your, Mike's, I think, doing a parade today. I think Mike's very excited about that. Evan, in terms of expectations going into this game, I think they were high. I think we have a lot to talk about here. I don't know if it met the expectations necessarily. What were you looking forward to in this game?
Just a close game, honestly. I mean, these are 2 very high-powered teams on both sides of the ball. That's obviously what makes a football game, good. You could even argue bring in special teams too, obviously an important factor. But especially, offense, defense, it was just a very, very highly talented matchup, I guess you would say. And it lived up to the hype, probably. In the first quarter, it was tied at one point. Kind of a back and forth. It was like 7-7, then 14-14. But then Vernon threw, a couple picks, probably more than he should have. And Toronto just kind of pulled away. We'll get into more of that and what I think about that performance specifically later. But overall, in terms of the matchup, I just think, it was I was really expecting BC to win, even though the game was in Toronto. And it did look like that was, plausible for a while. Even when, Vernon was still kind of turning the ball over, like in the first half, I was like, okay, like they can still kind of pull themselves out of this. But by the third quarter, all hope was lost. So,
yeah, Jason, go for it.
I was going to say it's kind of a misleading story. Score line because I thought that the defenses actually did play very well in this one. It's just a bunch of turnovers caused the score to be, and a big special teams touchdown by the Argos caused the score to be a lot higher than I was expecting.
Well, that was the thing. It felt like at the beginning that Toronto couldn't score on offense at all. It felt like that, BC, they came down, they scored early. Toronto, we kind of stopped them, and then we had the punt return, and then it really felt like kind of that it kind of unraveled from there. I guess my big question will go to both you guys. We can go to Evan first. Did Vernon Adams here 6 interceptions in the game? I tweeted I've watched 24 weeks of XFL and USFL football. I've never seen a quarterback throw 6 interceptions. I guess the CFL record is 7. I think Matt Dunnigan did, as well as Jim Mullen told me a couple others. Evan, did Vernon Adams lose this game, or did the Toronto Argonauts win this game?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have to lean towards Vernon Adams lost, unfortunately, because I still feel like without the turnovers, BC would have won, or at least made it extremely close. Just again, given what went on in the first quarter before the turnovers really started coming out. But yeah, I put in my notes, I said this was a very Jameis Winston-esque performance. And I mean that in kind of a good and a bad way, because if you look past the interceptions, if you take away that 6 interception number, Vernon Adams had 388 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was nearly averaging 10 yards an attempt, pretty much right on the money there. So yeah, if you take away the turnovers, I mean, he should have easily won this game. But when when you're giving the ball away 6 times to the other team, especially 3 going to the same player, Robertson Daniel, gets pretty tough to win. And clearly, you just look at the score and that's all you really need to know. And again, yeah, it's a bit misleading on some fronts, but it's just a shame because Vernon in this game, I feel like, had so many good plays on offense that got overlooked because he was giving the ball to the defense, so many times.
Hey, Jason, same question to you.
Sorry, what was the question?
Did Vernon Adams lose this game, or did the Toronto Argonauts win this game?
Okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I do believe that Vernon lost this game for them. I think, especially when you looked at late in the fourth quarter, it looked like they had a lot of momentum towards a comeback when they were down by, I think they were down by 17 points at one point, and then they cut it to 11, and then I think they were driving, and then that one big interception that I don't know what Vernon was seeing on that play. I think that was the absolute killer, because I really do think they had the chance to come back in this game. So I think there are some of these picks that weren't his fault, and then some of them were obviously his fault. But I mean, when you throw 6 interceptions, it's kind of unacceptable. Kind of reminded me of a game that Peyton Manning had years ago when he played against the Chargers. And I think he threw like 5 interceptions, but also threw 4 touchdowns, and was just kept on coming and almost won the game anyway. But anyway, yeah, Vernon, I think, lost the game for the Lions overall.
It was hard. It was before that. I had my tweet ready before I was about to throw my hat in the trash when they were down 11 points going there at the end and 5 interceptions. And if the game had ended, or the Argos had ran out the clock, turning the ball over 5 times and only losing by 11 points is pretty remarkable, I think, if you really look at it. But to me, it felt like when I was in college, I was a little bit of a casino addict, and we had a casino by our college, and we could go because it was an Indian casino. I would go a lot, and it's kind of one of those things where you start losing, and then you're going like you throw more good money after bad, right? And you really need to know to walk away. And it felt like Vernon just kind of spiraled there, and it was just he was so lost. Even he had, I think he had a big completion to Keon Hatcher near the end as well. I'm like, that was still in triple coverage. Like, I'm glad Keon is in the phenomenal athlete that could catch the ball. But like, I don't know if that was still a great throw or decision to make. It just felt like he was so rattled. You saw him on the sidelines. Evan, are you surprised that we didn't see a Dane Evans outing here, even just to kind of give Vernon a break at the end?
Yes, I definitely am. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it just seemed it gets to a point where, even if there's only, you hit the 3-minute warning or whatever, or even maybe halfway through the fourth quarter. I mean, Vernon, again, in my opinion, minus the turnovers, had a very good game. But, if Dane Evans just comes in and manages for a bit and doesn't turn over the ball, even if he's not throwing as many yards, completing as many passes, that's kind of what you want at that point in the game. You just need someone to come in, manage, keep the deficit, close, so you can at least try and get back in it. Because like you said, there was a time where they were down by 11 and Vernon had thrown 5. And then you look at the score when Vernon throws 6, and it's like, well, they all do add up, even if, again, he had a great performance. So, yes, long story short, I do think Dane Evans should have come in at some point. What point in the game? I don't know. I didn't watch the fourth quarter of that game personally, but I'm sure there was a time where he could have come in.
Yeah, I have the tweet here. I guess just share this while talking about the Argos bye here. Yeah, the Argos have a bye to start the season, play 3 games. Have another bye. So Herb pointing that out. In terms of the Chad Kelly of it, Jason, I've noticed this, and I said this last week as well. He's kind of getting the Nathan Rourke rub here. Like, this is our savior now. We're talking about this guy all the time. I saw the attendance not great for the Argos. I think it was like 12 and change, which I would hope you would want a bigger for a marquee matchup on the long weekend and all of that. What did you make of Chad Kelly?
I think he started slow, like you said, and I think that was the big missed opportunity for BC in this game, because they were moving the ball really well in the first half, whereas Toronto couldn't get anything going. But a couple of big plays really turned it around for them. But Chad Kelly in the second half, you saw the confidence start to grow. I mean, he can make some amazing plays out there, extend plays, really tough guy to bring down in the pocket. So I think that he definitely has the potential to kind of go the Nathan Rourke route and have that kind of a season this year. Maybe not in terms of the sheer numbers of it, but I think in terms of the talent out there, I think Chad Kelly is really showing why everybody believed in him to start the season, or why so many people were high on him to begin the year.
Evan, thoughts on Chad's performance?
Yeah, I had in my notes here, I literally said, Chad Kelly has no issues keeping this Toronto team on track from their Grey Cup win, because there was a lot of questions going into the season, Okay, great. Chad came in late in the Grey Cup, pulled off the victory. It was a thriller. It was great. Great story. That's what you want to see. But the reality is then MBT leaves, and Chad has to now, replace him for a full season and possibly many more seasons to come. Looks like Chad is going to be the new franchise quarterback there for a couple of years, assuming everything goes to plan. He doesn't get picked up by the NFL, doesn't get injured, whatever. but he's ready. Every week, he so far, like, we had that discussion, I think it was 2 weeks ago, is Chad Kelly the best or most important player in the CFL right now? And you could really make the argument that he is. At this point, again, I know maybe this is recency bias. Not every team played this week. You had 3 on a bye, but still, I think Chad Kelly being the quarterback of the Toronto Argonauts that's a difference maker. Like, they really could go back to the Grey Cup. And I know we had talked about this matchup in particular, possibly being a Grey Cup preview for when we're in Hamilton. But yeah, long story short there, I think Chad is great. And if he stays in this trajectory, that team is going to have no problems.
Well, and especially just, we've talked about this before with the CFL East here. I don't see a world where the Argos aren't at least in the finals there. And, maybe the Alouettes really tune it up here and come on. And I didn't think they played terrible in the first half. I saw against, Winnipeg here, kind of coming off their butt whooping and wanting to do all that. But yeah, the Argos are so good and the East is so bad. To me here, the one thing just to point out as well with this AJ Ouellette, and I know we've been talking about him before, 14 for 70, but he was on the sidelines a lot getting worked on. And I'm kind of afraid if he had been full go the whole time, I don't know if BC would have been able to stop that as well, right? It felt like BC, when he was in there, was kind of churning it and doing not as a standout performances last week where he kind of had the hat trick of touchdowns. But Jason, what did you make of that, AJ? And it seemed like we had Mizell was on the sidelines too, some injury bugs, especially AJ here, because I know we had such a good week last week.
Yeah, I think AJ Ouellette has looked excellent to begin the year. So I think that having him healthy going forward is such a important thing for the Argos offense. But I think that Andrew Harris came in, got a lot of work, but it wasn't the same when he came in. I definitely agree with you there, Reid. I think that Ouellette just brings a different level of physicality and shiftiness, I think, that Andrew Harris doesn't provide at this point of his career. And I think that he's kind of the key to that Argos offense, I think, going forward and what we've seen so far this season.
Evan, do you have anything else to add on AJ?
I would just say that, I kind of thought Andrew Harris would be the top rusher on this team. I understand that he's old, but I still feel like he would give, a bit more juice. But so far, they haven't even really needed him. In this game, he had 3 carries for 9 yards, and he hasn't really done a lot this season outside of that. I think he's had maybe a touchdown or 2, but AJ's the guy, clearly. And they don't have a problem with him, and that he's been rolling so far. He's one of these players that's sort of on the come up, and there's a couple guys like that we'll talk about later with some other teams, or at least I want to talk about. But yeah, I agree. He's been great so far this season.
A couple other notes here I had. I'm not the biggest Glenn Suter guy. I know it's kind of hit or miss on here. He was really worshiping Chad Kelly, and he's not following the rules. Like, he's breaking the rules. Like, he's just doing whatever. And then there was like a weird scrum at the end where they had it like really delayed the game a good 2-3 minutes while they were it was like the police officer kind of ticketing everyone, and he's like, that's not tough. Like, you need to be tough in the game. Like, this isn't the way to be tough. Jason, am I the only one that's out on Glenn? It was really when I turned on the game, I'm like, oh my God, we got Marshall Ferguson and Glenn Suter here. I'm like, this is really kind of, I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah, I thought they were very obnoxious, honestly, yesterday. I think that one of the big things with Glenn Suter is he and I'm all for talking up the Canadians in the league, but he goes out of his way to mention it every 2 minutes, and I think that that kind of drives me crazy. Same with Marshall, really. I think that it's good to mention that as an aspect of the game, but I think just the frequency in which it was mentioned drives me crazy. And I didn't really notice as much the Kelly thing, but yeah, definitely the Canadian thing is something I notice quite often with some of these commentators. But I think that Suter is probably the worst offender of that.
Well, and you had Jim Kelly there, right? So you had Chad's uncle there, and I've said before on here, in the alternate world where the USFL pays up to get Chad Kelly to come play there, the football landscape, I think, looks very different right now. Clearly for the Canadian Football League as well. But so they kept talking about Jim Kelly and the Buffalo Bills, and it's okay to you can like both the NFL and the CFL. It's okay. I'm like, Glenn, you're the last person that is ever should be it's okay to he is such a pro-Canadian, and it's great. Pro-Canadian, pro-CFL, and like, well, it's okay. If you want to watch the NFL, that's okay as well. I just thought it's kind of one of those things where you're like, hey, I'm okay if you do that. That's fine. If you keep saying it so much, it's almost like you're not okay with it. Evan, I don't know if you have anything to add, but any thoughts on Glenn or anything else?
Not really. I mean, I don't pick up on this, commentator stuff as much as other people do. I will say there definitely is a push for the whole pro-Canadian thing, and I think that's great, right? But with all sort of commentators, it's you can only bring up something to a certain extent. And this happened in the XFL, when they talked about the NFL, and in the USFL too, there was a lot of repetition. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, if you're bringing up the same thing so many times, it just gets boring. And then you're just sitting there like, all right, man, like, let's calm down a bit. Like, we got other things going on in this game. Like, maybe talk about, Vernon's 6 interceptions or something and, how that affects the flow. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, Glenn's also the one. Like I said, it's okay to watch this, but I'm going to poo-poo on the XFL or any other American leagues and stuff on there. We'll get out. We'll move on to the next game. I just had comments here. Denzel checking in for BC Lions yesterday. Uncle Denzel is a big fan of the CFL out here. Angie Murray, good morning, happy Independence Day. Marcin, hey, I enjoyed the game yesterday. James Henderson checking in. I was very surprised by the Lions. I guess their time at the top last of the week. I don't know about that. I guess we'll do that before we get out of here. Gary says, Evan, agree with you. Can't overcome 6 interceptions. We were really close. Fourth quarter was a testament to that. And then Andrew says, worse, Jason Payton threw 6 interceptions and just 2 DDs, but lost because there was a missed field goal to win it. My team never makes it easy. So I guess before we move on to the next game, we'll go Jason, then Evan. Cause for concern here with the Lions, or was this just like a freak performance by Vernon?
I just think that you're going to get these games from Vernon from time to time. I mean, that's the natural course of his career. He's going to have some very good games and some very bad games. And I think he was just due for one against a very good Toronto defense here. I picked the Argos to win on my channel. So I'm not overly concerned with the Lions. They moved the ball very well in this game against a very good defense. So if they can just cut out the turnovers, I think they'll be okay.
Evan, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, again, you take away that turnover column, I think everything else was about the same. Receiving core still looked great, especially with Keon Hatcher coming back into the lineup. You had, big play to Justin McInnes. A lot of great takeaways. Matthew Betts on defense had 2 sacks. So, they're still on the right trajectory. Again, it's as long as you, don't throw the ball to the other team 6 times, like, you're going to be just fine. Like, there's no problem there.
All right, so moving on here, we have the Winnipeg Montreal Alouettes game. So like I said, so this is my birthday. I come back. I got this all recorded on my Fubo to watch. Weird weather delay. Jason, how long was this? Because I kind of ended up fast forwarding through the panel because it came on and they're talking and it didn't seem like they really acknowledged it at first. How long of a rain delay was this?
So it was supposed to kick off at 7 p.m. Eastern time and didn't start until 8:40 p.m. Eastern time, I believe. So yeah, an hour and 40-minute rain delay.
Huge. So that ended up pushing it for it was interesting. So it was on the CBS Sports Network. I had it recorded, and then they ended up preempting it with the with like the Portland NWSL whatever soccer match. So I went on the CBS Sports Network. Unless you have it recorded, there's no on demand on there, which is kind of frustrating for me because I know the CFL Plus games don't have that right if you're watching them on your browser. But I would hope that the CBS Sports Network could put those on on demand on that. I did have in my notes here. I'm sad that they really made Marshall work all weekend. Like I think he's the low man on the totem pole. I'm glad he had to wait through the rain delay there to kind of call the game. Are we fans of the red Alouettes jerseys this season? I'll go Jason and Evan.
Yeah, I love them actually because I think they stand out compared to the other jerseys that we see in the league. I think that yes, Calgary has red jerseys, but I think they're different enough from them that they're a pretty good jersey in my opinion.
Is it like a throwback or is it an homage? Like, what is the story behind this, Jason?
Well, I'm not too sure about the story behind it or anything like that, but I mean, they've always had red as part of their color scheme, but they never made that their primary color. So I think it was just a natural thing that teams do. They kind of switch around the primary color of their jersey. So I think that's what they're going for here.
Yeah, a new alternate jersey. Evan, any thoughts on the jersey stuff? That's probably outside of your purview.
I mean, a bit, but like I still like them, and I honestly like a lot of the jerseys in the CFL this season. I know BC sort of has like the gray, and the black. I love that with the orange. Like the ones they wore in Toronto last night. Those are probably my favorite. And then Toronto's jerseys too, their new ones that they unveiled. I love those. So you've got a nice kind of collection here in 2023.
Yeah, it's such an easy thing to do to kind of like be a popular fan base a little bit there. Anyway, so long rain delay, we come in. It was interesting. Like I said, I'm watching the first half of this game. Montreal was keeping it close. They're going into the half. Like, okay, they're down 10-0, and then I finally flip on because I knew they lost the game, but I flip on and one field goal here at the end. Jason, what was the storyline of this game for you? Because it felt at least closest from what I was watching that the Montreal was at least playing decently in the first half.
Well, to me, this was a throwback game for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. When they first started being this really good team, they started being this team that could win with physicality, the running game, their defense shutting teams down. And that's exactly what they did in this one. Winnipeg's offense, passing offense specifically, could not get much going in this one, besides maybe Dalton Schoen had a pretty good game in this one. But I think that they won this game with their defense. Willie Jefferson showed up, had a couple sacks in this one. That was good to see from a guy that had a pretty down year in terms of production last year. So I think they won with the running game. Brady Oliveira ran the ball very well once again, despite having that reported injury. So I think this was just a throwback win for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and they didn't allow the Alouettes to get anything going.
Evan, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I would say, great bounce back defensively for Winnipeg after they gave up 30 points to BC the previous week. I think they really needed that as a confidence boost. And then, what else do I have here? Jason touched on a lot of the points, especially with Brady Oliveira. I think it was a slower day for Zach Collaros in the passing game, but, Oliveira stepped up, and that's sort of good, I think, for long-term success and health, if you can kind of rely on the ground game more and kind of give Collaros some, time off or time to rest. I mean, he still had 2 touchdown passes, but, I think like they were throwing the ball a lot early in the season. I mean, it was just, left, right, and center all over the field. But now that you have kind of Brady Oliveira with an expanded role, again, even with, the whatever injury he had that was reported, didn't seem like it bothered him with the 120 yards. So that was good to see. And then, on defense, there's a guy, Abu Darmi Soare, the cornerback. He was tied for the team lead in tackles with Alden Darby, I believe. And just wanted to point him out as someone who I'd like to see more of down the stretch. Very unique story from him. Played with the Potsdam Royals in the German league, and then eventually went over to a rookie minicamp with the Cincinnati Bengals last year, I think. So definitely someone that I think could have an expanded role with Winnipeg. And this was kind of the first time to me that he really stood out. So just wanted to point that out as well.
Yeah, the Oliveira thing is, we obviously saw Andrew Harris there for years, and Oliveira was kind of always at number 2, really coming in here really on his own. Jason, how impressed are you with Brady here throughout, 4 weeks of the season?
Yeah, I'm just incredibly impressed with him because I think going into the season, he's a guy that I wasn't super high on his upside. I didn't think he was that great last year, despite having 1,000 rushing yards. I think just his usage was really high, but I think this year he's really established himself as one of the better running backs in the league. Can catch the ball to the backfield. Is an incredibly well-rounded player, can run inside the tackles, outside the tackles. So I think he's just a great running back that they covered in that offense, and is a key part of that team going forward.
He did have, right, I had a note on mine. He had 1 fumble, which I thought was that's pretty rare. I don't view him very much as a fumbling guy. Jason, do I have that note correct?
Honestly, I actually missed the first part of this game, so maybe I missed the fumble.
It's weird because I wouldn't it show it on the stat line here, but anyway, I have my note for that. Austin Mack had a really weird OPI call. I thought some of the calls in the first half were weird that way. I did have a funny thing too, just talking about Winnipeg defense. This Willie Jefferson coming in. It was like a face mask, and it like turned his helmet sideways, and he was like completely blind and still just going at it. I thought he was good. Evan, we talked about kind of the bounce back Winnipeg defense. Good to see. Anything else to note on that?
Not really. I mean, I feel like it was just a very collaborative effort. I think Ricky Walker on the Blue Bombers had a nice game with a sack and 3 tackles for loss. But other than that, just a very collective effort. And, holding a team to 3 points, no touchdowns, that's an accomplishment in any game. And I know that's sort of not necessarily a standard for Winnipeg, but, I think there were a lot of questions after their loss to BC last week. And, this might have not answered all of them, but you have to keep in mind, the weather delay, I think, affected performance for both teams. So it might not have been perfect, but I liked a lot of what I saw from that.
Yeah, I have my note. Yeah, the Austin Mack had the weird OPI call, and then there was another call. Like they had a defensive on Montreal, and then they came back and they had an offensive against. Very hard. I've watched football now, and I'm certainly no expert on this. I don't know how you're supposed to defend balls, and I certainly don't know with that. It was just a really long one with Austin Mack too. They were kind of took it out. It felt like they were kind of beating themselves. And then Drew Wolotarski here on his first TD, really getting almost like shoved out of the stadium. I thought very dangerous there, kind of getting shoved by the defender. Jason, do you have any other thoughts on the game itself? We can talk Montreal and Winnipeg here, kind of like future looking, but anything else on this game?
No, I just think it was a very workmanlike performance from the Bombers. They just went in, had to bounce back, and they got the job done. Wasn't pretty, but I think, yeah, like you said, I think the rain delay kind of took a lot of steam out of this game, and I think as someone watching it, kind of took a little bit of excitement out of the game as well. So, yeah, definitely agree with you there.
Evan, anything else? How do you feel here? I guess, how do we feel about Montreal moving forward? Because I would like to have the East be at least somewhat competitive this year, and I don't know if the Redblacks are going to do that, and Hamilton's kind of jury's still out. How do you feel about Montreal moving forward?
Yes, so despite them only putting up 3 points in this game, I still am a firm believer in the whatever we're calling it, saison de Cody Fajardo.
Yeah.
And I do think the Alouettes, they could be a dark horse Grey Cup contender. I dare I say that too early, but I think, again, just given, where the East is at right now, I really think that they could slot in behind Toronto. And then just a couple players on the Alouettes side that I want to talk about. Keon Julian Grant, I know is someone that we've talked about in the past. I spoke about his potential before, but he's already living up to the hype here, a month into the season. And it's really good to see that. I think he was drafted in 2019. So he's someone I've had my eye on, the whole year. And to see what he did in this game, makes me sort of, I guess, reassure my, feelings about him. He's a phenomenal player with phenomenal upside. And the same goes for Austin Mack. I know we've talked about him too at several points on the show this season, but, I really think he could be, sort of the next great, CFL receiver with multiple all-star appearances. You could be putting him in the top 5, maybe by next season. And I don't want to speak too early, right? I understand we're a month into, however long the season is, 18 or I guess 21 weeks, 18 games in the regular season. And, you can never speak too soon. But, I mean, so far, he has the NFL pedigree. He has sort of the, I don't know, just big playability. He's got really everything you could ask for. I'm definitely going to study his game more, go back, over some of the tape. But my kind of final thought here, at least from the offensive side in Montreal, which is what I really wanted to touch on today, is KJG and Mac. That's like, it looks like Montreal's just found the perfect replacement for Geno Lewis and Jake Wieneke, which was a big question going into this season. So I think it's really good to sort of see that, and especially in that Winnipeg game. Again, I know they didn't score. I know it was kind of a weird night with the weather delay, but a lot of positive takeaways there. Really, if you're Montreal still.
Hopefully the background noise here, I'm muting myself on and off. My neighbors decided to mow their lawn at 9:33 on the holiday Tuesday. So, you can't beat it on that. Hey, Jason, and then we have a couple comments. We'll get to the last game and then we'll do the list here. But how we feel in Montreal moving forward? Because I think Winnipeg, it is what they thought. They got whooped. I mean, you can comment on that too. What do you make of these teams moving forward? What did we learn here?
Well, I think to echo Evan's point, I think it's very good sign for Montreal that the receivers have stepped up, filled those roles that were vacant on paper to be going into this season. So I think that's huge for the Alouettes. One thing with Cody Fajardo and why I'm a little bit hesitant to say I'm all in with him is he's still taking a lot of sacks. He holds the ball too long, in my opinion. He had a really brutal red zone interception when they were trying to come back in the game, and they had a chance to. And I think William Stanback also had a big fumble as well. So a couple of turnovers really hurt the Alouettes down the stretch in this one. But I think overall it's still a strong start to the season for them. But I think we just need to see a few more weeks of data from them.
We have a couple comments here. Scott's checking in late. Argos are America's CFL team. I don't even know if the Argos are Canada's CFL team. I would start there. Jody, a big Argos fan, checking in Argos. It was fun to watch. And then we have a comment here. Shocking how the CFL doesn't market Austin Mack to the big The Ohio State University fan base. we've had conversations for years on here where like, do these leagues need to market more to the colleges that the people go to? Like, I don't know how much that does if you're a CFL fan, or like if I'm an American Ohio State fan, like, oh, I'm going to go watch. I don't know. It's kind of the global draft to me. Like, oh, we got a kicker from Norway. If I live in Norway, I'm going to watch the CFL. Jason, do you have any thoughts on that? Like the marketing of the CFL? Like, let's really tap into like the American college system in terms of marketing.
Well, I don't know how much it would move the needle in terms of getting additional fans to watch the league, but it definitely can't hurt to put out more information specifically about the American players that are coming into the league, because a lot of people just don't know that these guys played at major universities. So, yeah, I definitely don't think it hurts, but I don't think I'm skeptical about how big of an impact it could make.
And then we have, I don't know if this is breaking news, Elks trade Kevin Francis to the Redblacks for 2024 fourth round pick, according to the 3 Down Nation. I don't know if that just got commented on here. I don't know if that's breaking news. Talking the Elks on here, this game feels a little bit like a fever dream to me. Back last Friday on here, we had Edmonton, the battle of the, Ottawa was the second longest not winning at home streak on here. Evan, Ottawa finally puts it away 26-7. We'll get into the Jarrett Dagies of it all, but what did you make? Thoughts on the Redblacks finally getting the home victory?
Yeah, well, that's what's kind of funny here is, the Redblacks get their, first home victory in X many games over the team that still hasn't won at home in even more games. So that was a bit, it's happy and sad at the same time, right? I'm sure it's definitely happy if you're an Ottawa fan and you were at that game. But yeah, this game, to be honest, really don't have many takeaways from it, especially not many on the Edmonton side. We'll get into that later with Jarrett Dougie, or I hope I'm saying his last name right.
It's Daggy, right? I think Max told us it's Daggy.
Yeah, I better not screw that up. I think I've called him 4 different names at this point. But anyway, so for Ottawa, the one player I really want to talk about is Demontre Tuggle, the running back. I think it was interesting. He had 17 carries for 126 yards. But the more interesting storyline, I think, is that he's another Ohio player sort of slowly breaking out in the CFL, or someone that might have a high upside. And, the other guy that went to Ohio was Nathan Rourke. So, it was interesting to kind of see that. Definitely a great game for him, happy for him and his performance. I want to talk about Tyree Adams again quickly. I thought he had a modest performance. He could have had a couple more yards through the air. I think he had 185 passing yards. But in terms of, completion percentage and yards per attempt, those were spot on. I think they're definitely building something with him. Again, whether it's long-term or not, we'll see. We still got to find out, how well Masoli can play when he comes back. You have to keep that in mind as an Ottawa fan. But I think at this point, Tyree Adams is a solid backup option, and you're definitely going to take him over Nick Arbuckle because, we saw how well that experiment went at the beginning of the season. And that's no hate to Nick Arbuckle, by the way. It was just an unfortunate stretch of events there. But the last thing I really want to talk about for Ottawa that's, I think something that's going to get overlooked is they had 2 cornerbacks, Hakeem Bailey and Abdul Kana, combining for 6 tackles for loss, which I think at the defensive back position to have those kind of numbers is pretty impressive. Just sort of something that stood out in the stat sheet, not necessarily something that you would have picked up on during the game. But yeah, overall, I mean, this was definitely a game that Ottawa needed. I know it's against Edmonton. I know they're not the strongest team, but Ottawa really needed a win like this where they could just go out in front of a home crowd and just have a good time again, because there hasn't been a lot of that for this team in what feels like a while.
Yeah, Jason, do you take anything away? I have a fly around me now. Do you take anything away from Ottawa winning this game because it was against the Elks? Like, what do you make of this?
I mean, you got to take some positives out of it. I mean, the thing is, like, the last time they won a home game was also against Edmonton. So I think they've won like 2 home games in the last like 4 years, and they've both been against the Elks. So take that for what you will. But I think, Tyree Adams provided a good spark for the team. I think that he allows them to run a little bit more of, versatile offense because of his legs. I think he can get outside and run some bootlegs and whatnot. And that kind of puts additional pressure on the defense. So it kind of opened up their playbook from that perspective. And I think that also opened up the running game as well. So I think Tuggle played really well in this game for them, like Evan said. And then I think their defense has actually looked very good through 3 games this season. Against Montreal week 1, they looked good. And then against Calgary, they looked pretty good for the most part. So definitely some positive signs in Ottawa, but I think they'll need more from their offense going forward if they want to consider themselves true contenders. But like you said, Evan, it's up to when Mazzoli's back, I think.
And we still have no time. I know there was the big notes here coming off the bye, but as far as I know, there's still no timetable on when he's coming back, right, Jason? Jason? No. Okay. Yeah.
Good.
Okay, and so anyway, so no timetable on that. I have some notes here. You know, we have the big kind of Daggy. You know, he's coming out. Okay, what are we going to do here? 19 of 33. According to Morley Scott on here, it looks like Cornelius is back, taking the ones for the Alex. I have tweeted here the definition of insanity. Evan, what do you make of this? We're going back to Cornelius again.
Yeah, so Jarrett Deggy definitely came down a bit, back to earth, I would say, after he kind of came in the other week and had a nice, ending to that game, and everyone started asking the question, hey, maybe is Jarrett the guy going forward? He was, again, this was a game where, he turned the ball over too much. If you can look past the turnovers, I think he did all right. Like, it was definitely better than what Cornelius had offered in previous weeks. So I'm still surprised, yes, as well, that they are going back to Taylor Cornelius. I think, like it didn't work out with Jared, but, you could put in like Trey Ford, and I know Kyle Loxley's gone now, but maybe you try getting another guy, or even, Khalil Tate's more of a short yardage option. I know they signed him, but it wouldn't even hurt for him to get it. I mean, at this point, it's such an experiment, and we can talk about this for a while, but I just feel like there's so many things there where it's like, you can only plug so many things in, to fill so many holes. And it's like, I just don't know how many holes there are. Like, it just seems like there's a lot of trial and error. And it seems like this team shouldn't be at a point where there's that much trial and error. And it's very frustrating because every week you want Edmonton to get better. And it just doesn't seem like they're heading in the right direction. It almost seems like they're regressing. And that's a problem. It's a problem that if it doesn't get fixed soon, might start costing people some jobs. And, I love Chris Jones. I think he's a great man. But at this point, if they don't win a home game this year, I'm sorry, but that's someone's got to go at that point. Right now, I think at the rate they're going at, you're looking at, a possible 4-win season. And I think Andy had brought that up in our chat, saying that that's almost a ceiling, because you could really say, 3 wins even. And I don't know, maybe that's being a bit harsh, but like, what else do you have to show for it? It's a real shame. And I'd say right now they're in a worse spot than Ottawa. I know Ottawa just broke their home streak too, and they've had their own struggles and they're down some players. But man, Edmonton, like every week, it's just like, I can't imagine what it's like to be an Elks fan. I really can't.
I have this tweet here I thought as well, this 3-down Monty. Chris Jones built this team. Chris Jones hired his assistants. Chris Jones chose to go all in on Cornelius. Chris Jones is 100% responsible for the current state of this Elks football team. It's time to move on from Chris Jones. I remember too with Rod, when they hired Chris, it was before they brought in Victor Cui, and there was like this, well, how do you hire the head coach and GM before the president? I think we're seeing maybe a little bit of that, disruption here now. Jason, what do you make of this? Just the overall welfare check on the Elks.
Oh, it's just such a circus in Edmonton. Like, now they're putting Cornelius back in. It just doesn't make sense. If you're going to make that switch, you got to let a guy that's making his first career CFL start at least have a couple of games to get it right. Like, if you really believe in the guy, and now you're showing that you don't really believe in the guy to get it right. And you're going back to a formula that that won't work in Taylor Cornelius. So it just drives me insane. Like I said, what I would do is just put Trey Ford in there, try to make some kind of option run heavy offense at this point, because I just don't think this team can run the ball. I think the offensive line is also a huge problem. And I think that, it's just a complete circus in Edmonton. I really don't know what to make of it at this point. They just seem like Evan said, they're regressing.
Yeah, Gary here has the. I won't pull it up right now because it'll cover all this. In my opinion, O-line is the starting point. Doesn't matter who the quarterback, receivers, or running back is. If the O-line isn't working, this was interesting too. I had a tweet here from Chris. This Go Elk situation is truly fascinating. The whole business might need new ownership and governance model. It's possible the idea of community owned has actually destroyed it under the weight of traditions, storied history, and volunteer board. I don't know. I think when I talked to Victor Quee 2 years ago, I felt like it was a very different Victor Quee than I talked to this year going into the season. Evan, anything else on Victor, the Elks? Kind of like, I think it was a situation where he came in, had a lot of excitement and ideas, and I think there is a lot of things that you have to deal with there in terms of kind of this whole lineage of everything, and we can't disrupt too much, and we got to keep people happy. Anything else on the Elks here?
Right. I mean, there's really two sides to the situation. You know, what we've discussed a lot on this show is on-field performance. You know, you're talking about, Jarrett Dagey, Taylor Cornelius, Geno Lewis, et cetera, et cetera. But the other side of it is kind of behind the scenes, right? It's what you don't see on the field. It's, fans not being in the stands. You haven't won a home game in X many, at this point, you're talking years, which is just staggering. I know there was the COVID year and everything, but still, you're talking about an ownership group that came in very excited, and a coaching staff that came in very excited. Chris Jones, again, all the assistants, everyone that he put together, everyone came in really excited. And that excitement has quickly disappeared, and for good reasons, because it's just there's so much, I want to say misfortune, but I feel like a lot of it, is just it's poor construction. It's, I feel like this whole, again, love Chris Jones, great man. I think he's from Tennessee. So, a fellow Southerner, that's fantastic. I love Chris Jones. But, yeah, as a coach, you can only have so much loyalty towards a player. And I know we're shifting back here from the ownership sort of to the on-field play. And that's fine because I can only talk about, the ownership so much because I only know so much about it, right? As fans, you're only seeing a lot of the on-field product. So I'm going to go back to that for a minute and say, you can only have so much loyalty towards a guy like Taylor Cornelius before you kind of just have to realize, like, if I don't pull the plug or switch something soon, this could not only cost my job, but everyone else around me. The whole domino effect could fall pretty quickly if you don't start making drastic changes. So it's kind of weird to see Edmonton. It's like you made the right step putting in a guy like Jarrett Dagey, and I know he didn't have the best performance, but then you immediately go back to Cornelius as if nothing happened. And I'm with Jason on this. I think at this point, Trey Ford is like, it's just screaming Trey Ford. That just seems to be the top option, in my opinion. Now that you've let go of Kyle Loxley, it would appear that you have more trust in a guy like Trey Ford. And I really liked what I saw from him last year, before he got injured. So I don't know. I mean, there's so many questions here, but it just doesn't seem like, again, there's just not really any answer. Like it almost seems like, you never want to speak too soon. You never want to speak too early. But I was saying in week one, it's like you just have this ominous feeling that like the season has almost gone to waste already. And you never want to say that in such a long season. But at this point, you're kind of just playing to get things done and to move on to the next thing, which in week 4 is, that's brutal. That's all I'll say about it.
Jason, I was flashing some tweets on here. I have yours up here every week. I think the Elks have hit rock bottom. They still might not be there. I also had Christina Costable kind of with the gross Britney face. Any other thoughts on this, comments, and then we can look forward?
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to say, and what drives me nuts about this, is that they had the confidence to start Trey Ford last year as a true rookie over Taylor Cornelius. And Cornelius, I believe, was the fourth string quarterback to begin last season, but they won't start him now. I just don't get that. So, just confusing all around from the Elks and how they've managed their quarterback situation. And I think that Chris Jones, I think it's just a situation of him wearing too many hats there. He's the GM, he's the head coach, and the defensive coordinator. And that also makes it more difficult, like the one tweet was saying, to get rid of him during the middle of the season here.
So let's move forward here, and then we can kind of hit this 3-down thing before we get out. I think we'll go good time-wise here, and then I got to go. I got a 4th of July wedding here today. Looking forward here, who is it? Okay, so Montreal's on playing BC here. Edmonton, Thursday night, going into Saskatchewan. We have Calgary at Winnipeg, Ottawa going into Hamilton, and then Montreal at BC. Evan, a game here you're looking forward to? Thoughts here as we kind of recap this?
I would definitely say BC Montreal. Seems like a kind of a bounce back game for both teams, given that they both lost, and given the potential on both sides there. I definitely think that'll be a good way to wrap up the week. And then a game that I would say has some potential is Calgary Winnipeg. Calgary is still a team I believe in. I would not put them over teams like, a Saskatchewan or again a Montreal, even though they're in another division. But I feel like Calgary, maybe they come off the bye, maybe Jake Mayer, does some things better, and maybe they give Winnipeg a run for their money because, again, Winnipeg, we're not counting Winnipeg out yet. Obviously, they have been essentially a dynasty here in the past couple of years, going back to 2019. But, at this point, like, Calgary could give them a run for their money. I mean, they've been playing slower football. Again, I know they played in a game that had a weather delay, and that might have caused some issues. And the week before, they kind of just crumbled. But it would be nice to see, a close Winnipeg-Calgary game, especially in Winnipeg, too. I think that'll be a good one.
Jason, are you worried about now a red-hot Ottawa Redblacks team coming into Hamilton?
Well, I'll be picking the Redblacks to win this game. That's for sure. Yeah. I just don't have any confidence in the Tiger-Cats at this point. But, I mean, maybe they got it together over the bye week. They figure out magically how to score touchdowns. But at the end of the day, I just, I'm looking forward to that game. I'm going to be at that game. But I just don't have that much confidence. I don't have that much excitement for that game. Although what I will say, what would provide some more juice to that matchup is if Jeremiah Masoli suddenly made his season debut at Hamilton, his return to Hamilton. But it doesn't look like at this point, based on reports I've seen, that he's super close to returning.
Yeah, it's hard. It's getting to the point in the season here where it starts becoming a little more lopsided, right? I mean, the first couple weeks, and okay, what's going on? And I understand the CFL season's a marathon, not a sprint, but we are kind of discovering kind of who these teams are at this point. I would like to see BC really kick the snot out of the Montreal Alouettes here just to kind of bounce back and kind of show what they're at. But obviously, love Cody and kind of everyone over there. Yeah, Winnipeg, I think that'll be a good one, kind of Friday night. This Edmonton, I just don't know if they can get right here going into Saskatchewan. I think that's going to be tough for them. Any other thoughts you guys have? We can kind of hit this list real quick in the last 5 minutes before we get out. The 8 ways CFL fans' leadership is failing them. Anything else from either of you guys before we do that?
I was just going to say that Jake Mayer usually plays really well against Winnipeg based on his early career here. So I think that that could be a pretty fun game on Friday night.
So we have this here. This is from Matthew Ross. And like I said, Jim Mullen had kind of shared this earlier in the week. I had this bookmark because I'm like, well, we've got, 3 games, kind of get into this. And so he had posted on CFL, on Twitter and on Reddit here, things where CFL fans feel like leadership is failing them. And I want to see if we don't need to do a deep dive on all of these, but, talking like grassroots, developing the grassroots, working with Football Canada, where Football Canada has an agreement with the NFL now and kind of trying to figure that out. I know Arash Madani just got signed on to the board of Football Canada, technology, we're doing the stats and kind of all that stuff. Evan, where would you say that you feel like CFL leadership is failing its fans right now if they had to ask you?
It's a great question, and this is really a great discussion to have here at the end of the show. I lean towards promotion. And not necessarily, promotion of the product, but really it originates with diversifying the product. And I've talked about that with certain people before where the CFL has unfortunately fallen behind in areas where, I guess like fan engagement, it just, a lot of it seems almost recycled. And what I mean by that is, the XFL and the USFL, again, those are completely different products, so I'm not really trying to draw a comparison here, but those are also football leagues operating in the United States. And, like the XFL, I don't know, it seemed like they made an effort, same with the USFL, to sort of, bring in new concepts and, kind of make it their own unique product. Like there was always something, again, unique about it. And the CFL is definitely unique. That's not really the point I'm getting at here. The CFL, in terms of their teams and location and really the history is what makes it so different. But I just feel like, every year there's just less and less, like the number of in-person fans is dropping off. The viewership is dropping off. I feel like, the league, kind of ending their relationship with ESPN to stream the games through ESPN Plus. I feel like that, Ultimately, I feel like that wasn't a great idea because now your TV option is CBS Sports Network, which just isn't as accessible because they used to have a lot of games on like ESPN2, which a lot of people had. Now you're streaming through CFL Plus. I do like the CFL Plus. If you want to talk about promotion in positive areas, I think, them sort of expanding CFL, to a broadcasting stage, at least for the games that aren't being aired on CBS. I think that's a good step in the right direction to grow international viewership. But ultimately, a lot of the product just seems so, old and used. It's like every year I want to say it's the same thing. I mean, they bring in different players and this and that, but ultimately it's like they just really need a brand refresh. I think that's what they really need. And I don't know where that starts. Again, this isn't necessarily my expertise. I only know so much about the ins and outs of, I know a decent amount about how football leagues work, but there's a lot about this that runs deeper than that. So ultimately, I think, you're just looking at just finding more ways for fans to be interested again, whether that means bringing in different names, or I think a lot of people at this point, and I've discussed this too, it's just expanding the Canadian talent, make it more. There's sort of this hodgepodge right now where you have some good Canadian players, but then a lot of the guys that get talked about are Americans, and some people don't like that. And, there's a lot of the pro Canadians who can't deal with that. So I think maybe you're looking at, bringing in more Canadians and taking pride in sort of the Canadian football development. I mean, you brought up Football Canada earlier, Reid. I mean, you want to bring in maybe homegrown prospects. It was a big deal, last year when Trey Ford, was drafted, a Canadian quarterback that had starting potential. I know we just talked about the Elks before, but I feel like, the league, if they capitalize on that homegrown talent, that could draw in more viewers from their own country who are already tied into, again, the universities, youth sports programs in Canada, things of that nature. And I know I'll end this with saying that's a controversial topic, and I understand that, bringing Americans to that league definitely diversifies the talent pool just because of their background. I mean, look at a guy like Austin Mack, who played at Ohio State. You don't really have that in Canada. So again, it's a controversial topic. I would still like to see Americans in the league. So maybe what I'm getting at here ultimately is you change the import rules again. But I don't know. I've already talked a lot, so I'll just leave it at that.
That's good. Jason, before we go, what do you want to see here? As someone, you followed the league, you cover the league every week. What would you like to see them? How are they feeling, the CFL fans?
Well, to borrow a line from my good friend on social media, Todd Moggy, this league has to act like a professional league. Just do the simple things right. And that would really change the perception, I think, of the league. I think that something as simple as having your statistics correct, having live updated statistics, I think that's important. Having, just good infrastructure around the league. I think that's important. The tech thing, I think, is absolutely huge in terms of being able to reach new fans and have data accessible to fans. I think that is super important. But I think the league just needs to do the simple things better, because I think there's certain areas that they just don't do well, and I think that has really plagued their reputation. And I think going forward, there's a lot of issues we can talk about, and they get into a lot of these in this article. But I think a lot of it comes down to I think transparency is a big thing as well, because the league is kind of a 6th month a year league, or however many months long the season is, because in the off season it's pretty dead around the CFL. Not many people talking about it. The league needs to find a way to keep themselves more relevant during that time. Maybe it's holding more of a more press conferences or something like that, or just being more open about what their plans are. But I think at the end of the day, there's just a lot of problems plaguing the CFL, and I think that being transparent and acting more like a professional league is a big thing. I don't think I was very clear there, but acting more like a professional league is very important, I think.
It's interesting, and we obviously deal with this a lot with the XFL and the USFL, and I think all these other leagues, and to lump the CFL in there, which I know that they don't like. And I was talking with Jim Mullen last night about this, and I said, I understand the CFL is not an alternative league in their mind, and nor should it be. But just in terms of kind of the greater landscape, it is right. I understand it's it's a primary football and everything in Canada. I understand all that. I deal with this with the XFL and the USFL. Like I said, everyone looks at the NFL and it's like, well, we need to act like that, right? Like we need to be, and you get maybe a little bit more standoffish sometimes. And we had the whole thing this year with the USFL and like, we're real football for real fans. And like, we really know what we're doing. And then they come out before the championship game and it's like, we're baffled why our ratings are down this year. And you're like, well, because you kind of acted standoffish and like an a-hole all year in terms of, this is our league and this is what we're going to do. And it's the same with the CFL. I think like embrace more of the grassroots, embrace more of, the content creators like, Jason and like the CF perspective guys and like, the three down, like, the NFL doesn't need to play ball with anyone because they're bigger than anything in the entire history of the earth. Where anything else besides that, I wish that they would lean more in. And I've said that the same with the XFL. I think the XFL needs to be more CFL than NFL in terms of let's get fans out to the communities, let's get people working, let's do fan events, let's do local trade shows, let's kind of do all this stuff. Like I said at the top, where Rod was kind of lamenting that they don't do that anymore. And I don't know if it's lack of funds or lack of carrying or lack of resources or lack of time, but yeah, it's hard, and I talk with some of the CFL teams and okay, we only want players to come on during the bye week, and certain teams like, well, we only want people to come on during whatever, and we can't do it during training camp, but then during the season it's too busy. It's like, you gotta kind of, don't hide this in the bushel basket. You kind of got to get this stuff out here. So that's kind of my 2 cents. Evan, anything else from you? We'll go to Jason. We'll get out of here. Like I said, I got to go. We got a wonderful 4th of July wedding here today. So anything else from you, Evan?
Yeah, sometimes I wonder how different the landscape would be right now if the CFL and the XFL kept their partnership in place. I know there were some talks about, potentially having a XFL team maybe in Toronto, whether that's related to the Argonauts, I don't know. That might really piss off the pro Canadians, so I won't go into that too much, at the risk of being bullied or something like that. But no, I mean, look, it's a very complex issue. That's the bottom line here. There are many issues, plaguing the league. It's not just one glaring problem that we're all, dealing with or looking at. And I do think the league has time to turn it around. I think the one great part about this product is if you can get fans engaged and can get fans to follow along, it's a 21-week season. And I keep saying that every show. I'm like, 21 weeks. But like, that's a long time. I mean, you're going from, June to November, in the Grey Cups in November. That's a long time for football. I mean, you're looking at, those are, NFL numbers. So yeah, I mean, if you can get fans to kind of commit to a team and, it's really something to follow along. That's what the CFL has the advantage over leagues like the XFL and the USFL, where it's only a 10-game regular season. There's a lot more time to sort of, be a fan or, engage with the product and really, follow along. And there's so many more things that could happen. It makes it more interesting on that front. And that's a part too that I think the league could really capitalize on. So that's my 2 cents as well, on top of the whole, I don't know what I was talking about before even. I guess it was sort of the, the import sizes, things like that, developing more Canadian talent. I think all those things would definitely be a step in the right direction.
Final note for me, we'll go to Jason. I just saw this here, courtesy Farhanology. It looks like Mazzoli is starting practice today. So that is exciting here. Good news for the Redblacks. Good news potentially for your matchup there. Was that the Friday matchup? Right, Ottawa coming in there. But any other thoughts? Any other thoughts from you, Jason, before we get out of here?
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about the whole, and this is more of an overarching problem with the league, is that I think there's a lack of lockstep with all the 9 teams. I think that not much comes from the CFL front office itself. I think a lot of it is just due to a lot of the things in terms of engagement, promotion is up to the teams themselves, and I think that's a big problem. There's less of that league-led initiative. I think that's a big problem. I think there needs to be more centralization in the league in terms of the leadership.
Yeah, that's it's tricky, and that was like when we had come into the kind of all the XFL talks and kind of learning how all of this works. And Ambrosi is more of like at the whim of them and trying to balance kind of all that stuff. It's interesting because we talk in the XFL and like, or the USFL, hey, we want to sell off all these franchises and do whatever. I'm like, that it's hard then, and then you got to deal with, it's easier when you kind of have central ownership there of kind of, managing all of this. And, when the XFL, I'm like, if they can't get social right, where it's one office kind of doing it all spread out, good luck then when you kind of have, 8 or 9 or whatever different kind of individual franchises. We will get out of here. I appreciate it. Check out, Jason does his like, the kind of the previews going into the weekend, and then kind of the instant reactions and all of that stuff. Hope you have fun at the game this week. Evan, I appreciate it. I don't know if we mentioned it on the show, but Evan will be joining us at the Grey Cup as well. And Jason's going to be there in Hamilton, and I'll be there. So should be fun. We'll figure that out. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.